This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good morning, America. The devastation in Maui continues to overawe and cause extraordinary grief. And former President Trump is out on $200,000 bail, but he's going to be arraigned the day after the debates. Is that the worst counter-programming choice in history? We'll find out. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
living in the new world with an whole soul.
Morning glory, America. This is Rich Men North of Richmond. The number one song in America. I looked at the front page that told me about this yesterday. What's his name, Adam? I forget his name. Oliver Anthony. And I watched it and I said, what? How? And I it's an angry song. Richmond north of Richmond. That would be the Beltway. Now, I'm north of Richmond. I'm in Maine. Hope he's not mad at me. I honestly sometimes say that American culture is impossible to actually understand. There's too much of it. And so you can't put too much weight on anything. But he's singing that song, and it goes to number one. And what's his name again, Adam? Chris North? Chris North? Oliver Anthony. I don't know why I thought it was Chris North. I'm so surprised. I'm also surprised by the president in Maui. 800 people are missing. Okay, did anyone notice we went from 111 dead to 800 missing in one day? Did anyone notice that? You see the book over my shelf if you're watching on the Salem News channel, Kabul. And Kabul is the untold story of Joe Biden's fiasco and the warriors who fought to the end. And you should get that book. And they're going to come back on the second anniversary of the disaster at Abbey Gate. But no one's paying any attention to this book because we're moving on because that's what we do. New songs, new stories. But I notice things, and I notice when a song goes from nowhere to number one. Okay, that tells me something, and it tells me that the anger that propelled Donald Trump to the White House is still there. I think the former president's counter-programming decision to turn himself in the day after the debates is just astonishing. I wrote one of the candidates this morning, will you join me on the air? Because I don't know whether this was his choice. It can't possibly be his choice. You can't turn yourself in for your fourth arraignment in 5 months, the day after a debate that you skipped, willingly. Because that means on the stage, and by the way, Asa Hutchinson made the stage. I don't know, it's sort of like one of those death-defying runs down the train platform and grab onto it's like a Mission Impossible. Asa Hutchinson made the stage and sucked up time. I'm not happy with that, only because there is no way Asa Hutchinson is in the race for president. None. Zero. Zip. He's not Doug Burgum with $1 billion. He's not Mike Pence, the former vice president. And those are the two guys who barely made the train as well. And so 3 guys made the train. And I think the former vice president has a lot to say, having been in the sit room and having listened to and can contribute to the conversation about China. But I really think it's a 5-person race among the people on the debate, plus Donald Trump. And I just think the optics of this are so incredibly bad, not showing up for the debate. And I am Switzerland, and I've told the former president that. This is not secret. Last time I talked to him on the phone, I said, you've got to do the debate. And I'm not a Fox guy. I don't work for Fox. I show up on Bret's show and occasionally on the mornings with Dana and Bill because they're friends. And Bret's the last news show. But I don't work for any network except Salem. In my own show, I do what I want to do on my show. And I'm here to tell you it's a terrible decision not to show up. and tap into what you just heard. Joe Biden, honest to goodness, he's not going to be running for president. And we went from 111 dead to 800 missing. And I don't know what that means, but that is a disaster about which the president took, 2 weeks, a week to talk about? Because he went to the beach instead. And then when he got there, of course he did, I don't blame him for his standard struggles with the teleprompter. Cut number 12.
And this banyan tree, one called it the diamond in the rough of hope. Another referred to fire cannot reach its roots, what he said. Fire cannot reach its roots.
That's just typical Joe Biden. And you'd say, okay, so he can't read a speech. He can't read a speech. And the banyan tree, pretty much everyone who's been to Maui knows the banyan tree. I know it well. My kids know it. Everybody knows it. All right, so could have been a good moment. Then the president gives 2 speeches, one outdoors and one indoors. Here's the outdoor speech, cut number 11, because, it's always about Joe Biden.
America's deadliest wildfire in over a century. And Jill and I have what's left, walked Front Street, what's left of it. We've surveyed the damage from the air as well. The devastation is overwhelming. To date, 114 dead, hundreds of people unaccounted for. I remember when I got the call, my first wife and daughter, I was a young senator, and I got a call in Washington. I hadn't been sworn in yet. I wasn't old enough. And I was hiring staff in the Capitol at Teddy Kennedy's office. And I got a phone call saying from my fire department, and the young first responder kind of panicked, "You got to come home. There's been an accident." I said, "What happened?" He said, "Your wife, she's dead. Come home. Come home." The tractor trailer had broadsided her and killed her in a car accident along with my little daughter. And I remember all the way down from Washington home wondering what a lot of people here are wondering. What about my 2 boys? How are they? They were in the car. I never got a read on that. Were they going to be all right? They were badly injured. Were they going to make it? Had they made it? Wasn't until I walked into the emergency room that I saw that they were there. The difference between knowing somebody's gone and worrying whether they're available to come back are 2 different things.
The body language of the First Lady is all you need to watch if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. She's profoundly uncomfortable with that. I don't know if someone put that in his speech, and obviously they've got the worst speechwriting department in the history of the White House because you listen to Kamala Harris and the president. But then, all right, so that's bad enough. That's bad enough. Then we go to indoor at the Lahaina community event, cut number 10.
I don't want to compare difficulties, but we have a little sense, Jill and I, what it's like to lose a home. Years ago, now 15 years ago, I was in Washington doing Meet the Press. It was a sunny Sunday, and lightning struck at home on a little lake that's outside of our home, not a lake, a big pond, and hit a wire and came up underneath our home into the heating ducts, the air conditioning duct. To make a long story short, I almost lost my wife, my 67 Corvette, and my cat. But all kidding aside, I watched the firefighters, the way they responded. There's an old expression. I grew up right across the street from a fire hall in Claymont, Delaware.
I don't know what to say, America. I just don't know what to say other than he can't be president again. I hope he makes it to the end of this term. Governor Newsom, I hope you're getting ready and do debate prep and we can't not have a not president. He's just not president. And Vivek yesterday. Let's start with the Blaze TV, cut number 1.
9/11 inside job or exactly how the government tells us?
I don't believe the government has told us the truth. Again, I'm driven by evidence and data. What I've seen in the last several years is we have to be skeptical of what the government does tell us. I haven't seen evidence to the contrary, but do I believe everything the government told us about it? Absolutely not.
Last 2 questions.
All right, where this leads is to Another round of Vivek stories. And I said on Friday night on Special Report, it is the best of times and the worst of times for Vivek. He got a lot of attention, and with a lot of attention comes a lot of scrutiny and a target. And going 9/11 truth or get even close to it, getting close to it, there was nothing we don't know about 9/11. Nothing we don't know about 9/11. All right? And all you have to do is spend 20 years studying it to come to that conclusion. But if you haven't, you're susceptible to that kind of a mistake. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Good morning, America. There's other news this morning. Most of it is that President Trump has received a $200,000 bond and restrictions on what he can say about the case in Georgia. The former president said he will not appear in Republican primary debates. He's got a lead in Iowa, but as John Ellis from News Item said this morning, the good news is for everyone else not named Donald Trump, he's at 40% in the Des Moines Register poll. 40%. That's got to be a ceiling, not a floor, because he's not campaigning. He's not going to do the debates. And Ron DeSantis is at 20%. And that's because, again, I'm telling you, people are just starting to tune in. Nothing matters until after the first debate. There's a couple of stories on how the rivals plot to seize the spotlight. You know, that's not the way to win a debate. The way to win a debate is to be nimble, to be smart, and to be focused on obtaining one or two objectives and getting your time. The Financial Times has a story, fading DeSantis primary bids open up Republican race for second place. That's actually stupid, but it's from the Financial Times, so they don't know anything about American politics. It's stupid because nothing matters. Nothing, not a thing matters. Nothing at all until after tomorrow night is in the books and we begin to get an unusual fix on who's got chops. Car prices might be unsustainable for buyers. You think? Now, I have bought a new car in. When did the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I buy a new car? It's been more than 25 years. I don't buy new cars. But when did we last buy a car? It's been at least 10 years. Why? Because I live in the Beltway and in Mid-Coast, Maine, and I go out to California occasionally, and I don't do anything. I work from a studio within minutes drive, and I fly where I need to go, and I take Uber. I do not understand people buying new cars for the fun of new cars. I've never thought a car was, I'm not Warren Buffett nuts, but I am kind of nuts. They've got a lot of miles on them. The rising trend in private education, teeny tiny schools. Turns out that you give people their own choice. A few of them will get together and hire a tutor in the old fashion, and the tutor will actually work 5 or 6 kids into just brilliance. What a surprise. Many long COVID symptoms linger even after 2 years, new study shows. I know some people with long COVID or with family members with long COVID, and this is true and it is real. What to know about China's real estate crisis? That's the New York Times. The Financial Times, China growth fade after modest rate cut. Here's what I'm here to tell you about China, is that they're eating our lunch internationally, but they're falling apart domestically. Now, speaking about falling apart, I think yesterday was a bad day for Vivek Ramaswamy. First of all, you'd never get near nuttery, right? You don't do QAnon, and you don't do 9/11 truther, and you don't do we didn't land on the moon. And Vivek did not say what he ought to have said, which is, I trust the 9/11 Commission. We know everything about it. Instead, I played it for you. He said, I don't know what we don't know. Then he went on Caitlin Collins, because he does follow the everywhere all the time theory of campaigning, which is fine, and I believe it's a very valid model. But when you do everywhere all the time, you've got to be prepared not to be caught up with hostile people. Cut number 2.
This is really, it's funny. I mean, The Atlantic is playing the same game as CNN. It's funny. What I said is, on January 6th, I do believe that there were many federal agents in the field, and we deserve to know who they are. On 9/11, what I've said is that the government lied. And this is incontrovertible evidence, Caitlin. The government lied about Saudi Arabia's involvement. There was a Saudi spy named al-Bayoumi who they lied, and the government lied, and the 9/11 Commission lied. We know that because declassified reports in 2021 revealed that al-Bayoumi was indeed. What's that?
Yeah, the report that President Biden declassified.
Yes.
But your quote here, are you telling me that the quote is wrong
20 years later,
here?
yeah.
But are you telling me that your quote is wrong here because it says how many federal agents were on the plane at the Twin Towers?
Yeah, when I actually, and this is just lifting the curtain on how media works again, I asked that reporter to send the recording because it was on the record. He refused to do it. But we had a free-flowing conversation. The truth is there are lies the government has told about 9/11, but it's not the ones that somebody put in my mouth. It's the one that I articulated, which is that Saudi Arabia, absolutely, their intelligence was involved in 9/11. And that's a difficult thing you're not supposed to say. The facts back that up. Separately, as it relates to January 6th, same story all over again. There were federal agents in the field. I think they've lied about how many there were, and we, the people, deserve the truth, despite the layers of distortion that exist in the media to prevent us from getting it.
You're saying
Play cut number 3. I'm going to talk about relief factor next segment.
Caitlin.
All of the different measures here.
Caitlin, of course it's not sufficient. You take that tiny little clip when I've articulated at the Nixon Library last week a 1-hour speech with a whole range of deterrents. That is part of it. But I've also said that I would pull Russia out of its military alliance with China. I've also said that we would bolster our partnership with India to be able to close the Andaman Sea and the Malacca Strait. I've also said that we would actually send a signal very clearly that we will defend Taiwan, moving from strategic ambiguity to strategic clarity to say that we will defend Taiwan until we have.
Was the one little clip from this show, Dwayne?
No, it was from. What was it from?
Because Ro Khanna is online this morning telling me that Vivek was wrong on this show, and I said I just asked the questions, Congressman.
Yeah, it was from a different interview he gave.
I actually have no idea what Vivek was doing because both Caitlin and he interrupt each other. It's not the way to do an interview. Will someone wake up? You have to let people talk, and you have to let them ask questions. Gosh, what a train wreck. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dwayne is busy loading with Harley the entire Caitlin Collins, Vivek Ramaswamy exchange because I think, look, I have fair use restrictions. I just can't steal people's material. But I always give people use of my entire audio if it's something that they want to play in context. This needs context. Let me remind all of you, I got my 6 miles in yesterday, so today will be an off day, but my relief factor worked wonderfully. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. And I'll tell you right now that some of you are completely haywire because I didn't do it at the end of last segment. I did it at the beginning of this segment, and so I've turned your internal clocks off, and you're wandering around in a daze, zombie-like. Hugh didn't do his relieffactor.com pitch and didn't take it on the air with his lukewarm coffee. Well, the coffee is indeed lukewarm, and I just did it now, but I wanted to tease the segment where we set this all up. So please don't leave home without it. Please let it work for you like it works for me. And it was kind of mosquito heaven yesterday because the rain up north has been extraordinary, and the sunshine came out, so they just decided they would. But I had my off and my relief factor. Together, I can go a long way with off and relief factor. And I'm telling you, it works. Had an unsolicited call yesterday to the show from one of the relieffactor.com people. And I'm in the relieffactor.com studio, and I take it every day for the one reason. I want to keep doing this show for as long as possible. That means exercise almost every day, and take Sundays off if you want, and get rid of the minor diversions that keep you seated and not moving around. Get going every single day. Stay in good shape. Also want to remind all of you, thousands of you are stepping up. Look, our hearts break. I don't know how there are 800 people missing in Maui, other than it's sort of, I'm hoping it's just entirely bureaucratic incompetence and not that we've got 700 more people who are dead, but I don't know. And so my heart is breaking. That is going to be a scene that repeats in other places in this fall. Jezebel with Food for the Poor is the, Jezebel Garcia Pedroso is their emergency response director. And so she keeps an eye on the National Hurricane Center on where do we have to get this stuff. And so they've got a giant warehouse and they're pre-positioning because they see what the water temperature is. Give a listen to Jezebel.
I would say it's not late at all. We are just in time. So, if you are a donor ready to give, this is it. Things ramp up. We're seeing it out in the Atlantic, potential of 3 developments. It's common to see that. But what's not common and what's not natural about these hurricanes is when it impacts families, already those that are very vulnerable.
So what is not natural is 100 degrees water temperature. And so it's the warmest it's been. And this is not a debate about why that is. It is the actual fact that it is. And it is something that precedes a terrible hurricane season. So Food for the Poor is actually doing the pre-packaging, pre-positioning, and they're investing the money in it now so they're faster then so that we don't end up with a Maui situation where nothing is there when it needs to get there. Please be generous. $100 fills one of those boxes. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see. Let me also talk to you about the market update brought to you by Birch Gold. And Birch Gold this morning, gold is at $1,931. It went up yesterday, $8 an ounce. And the 10-year Treasury went up to 4.3 yesterday, even as markets rose yesterday. All right, so the Dow, not all markets, Dow went down 0.11. The S&P and the NASDAQ went up 0.69 and 1.56 respectively, as there's some separation among winners and losers, and the AI boomlet is back. I think I've told you this before. August stock markets are just completely fake. You can't trust anything in August because nobody's working on Wall Street. Half crews. There aren't going to be any big trading breakthroughs. The earnings report season ended. I got a random one here or there, and then everyone goes on vacation. And so they turn down the earnings season ends at the end of July and the beginning of August, and then everyone leaves Wall Street. And so it's just sort of drifting along, and it trades a little bit up and it trades a little bit down. But people are still making their AI plays, and they're watching China and wondering how bad the shutter. I'm going to talk with Congressman Gallagher next hour about that, about what he would like. I'm going to have Chairman Gallagher on for 3 segments, a long interview this morning with the chairman of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, because I'd like to know what he would like to have asked, having sat with his Democratic colleagues and his Republican colleagues on that committee and gone all over the country, and they've been at it now for 6 months, what would he like the debate people to talk about? Also have to talk to him about this kind of war, the book he made me read, and I'm sort of astonished at how much I did not know about the Korean War. I did not know what they did to our prisoners. The Chi-Coms are just evil people, and it's a Leninist society. And I thought Mao is dead, and they're changing, and I fell for that. And Nixon opened, 20 years after Korea, Nixon opened China, and we were kind of hoping that they would evolve towards a semi-capitalist. They haven't. They're a Leninist country. They've gone backwards in the last 10 years to the old Maoist regime, and it ought to dominate the debate. Not Donald Trump turning himself in on bail. It ought to dominate the debate. And so Mike Gallagher is going to join me about that. But first, I got to play for you the Vivek thing in its entirety. I've got time, yeah. This is Vivek with Caitlin Collins. And I just want to yell, doesn't she have a producer? Let Vivek talk. And Vivek, don't talk about what you're not sure about. Here is the full exchange from last night.
We're not making up any attacks on Donald Trump. I mean, covering his indictments is one thing. How you feel about those is pretty clear. One thing that you will likely be asked about on Wednesday night is foreign policy. And you recently said that to protect Taiwan, you would do this.
Guess what? We'll put a gun in every Taiwanese household, train them how to use it. That is how you make Xi Jinping think twice.
Do you really think that would be a sufficient plan to deter a Chinese invasion if it includes long-range missiles, ground troops, an aerial blockade, a naval blockade?
Caitlin,
all of the different measures here?
Caitlin, of course it's not sufficient. You take that tiny little clip. When I've articulated at the Nixon Library last week, a 1-hour speech with a whole range of deterrents, that is part of it. But I've also said that I would pull Russia out of its military alliance with China. I've also said that we would bolster our partnership with India to be able to close the Andaman Sea and the Malacca Strait. I've also said that we would actually send a signal very clearly that we will defend Taiwan, moving from strategic ambiguity to strategic clarity to say that we will defend Taiwan until we have semiconductor independence in this country. And so, yes, part of this is turning Taiwan into a porcupine. I think exporting our Second Amendment is a relatively free or low-cost way to do that. But I find it laughable that you will take that clip and then put words into my mouth as though that was a sufficient deterrent. Caitlin, with due respect, that's a joke, especially when I've offered as expansive of a deterrent strategy as I have.
It's not putting words into your mouth, and it's not saying that you didn't say those other things. It's just saying that you did say that part of your effort when it comes to Taiwan is giving people in Taiwan handguns.
This is really funny, Caitlin. It's been very educational for me to learn how media works. Yes, that is important. No one ever said that was sufficient to deter an invasion. From India to Russia to what I've said we would do with moving Ohio-class SSGNs to the South China Sea and to the Indo-Pacific. This is the stuff of actual deterrence and also strategic clarity that we would actually defend Taiwan. Yes, I do think I am the president who best knows how to deter China from going after Taiwan before we've achieved semiconductor independence, which is the most important foreign policy accomplishment the next U.S. president can deliver. And I gave a specific speech at the Nixon Library. In a big part, actually moving Russia out of China's alliance. But you also said that you would open up an NRA bureau in Taiwan. Is the reverse of what Nixon would have done.
I mean, you also talked about...
Yes,
I just think when you listen to plans to deter China, it typically focuses on radar systems and missiles that they need, not necessarily AR-15s.
Caitlin, you might be able to do this trick better with other candidates who don't really know how to respond to the game.
It's not a trick. I'm just simply asking what your plan is with Taiwan and following up on something you suggested.
What I have said countless times is strategic partnership with India to close the Malacca Strait if necessary. That's where China gets its Middle Eastern oil supplies. The number one thing to do, I've said, is end the war in Ukraine by pulling apart the Russia-China alliance. Xi Jinping's calculus right now is that if the U.S. actually is in dual conflict with Russia and China, then that makes it easier for China to go after Taiwan. So I say disband that alliance. I also think that we should, and I've said this many times, we should take one of the destroyers that are in Japan, run one a week through the Taiwan Strait until we've achieved semiconductor independence. Move to two Ohio-class SSGNs loaded with 100-plus Tomahawks apiece to the South China Sea and to the Indian Ocean. This is part of a comprehensive strategy that I've articulated in multiple places. But as part of that, I do think there's a reason why China does not have a Second Amendment. China is deathly afraid of a Second Amendment in its own country. And so making that an export to Taiwan is part of what many military experts call the porcupine strategy, which I do subscribe to and believe in. But I will not allow someone to put words in my mouth to say that I ever said that was sufficient. It is
I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm simply asking about something you said. We played a quote that you've made. Speaking of another comment that you've made. I never said it was sufficient. Vivek, speaking of another comment that you've made that is getting attention today about 9/11, a report in the Atlantic that you gave an interview to, you said, quote, I think it is.
I got to say right now, Caitlin Collins did not distinguish herself there, and her producers failed her. It is a trick. It is a cheap trick to have a comprehensive. Look, I spent 45 minutes with Vivek last week talking about China and Taiwan, and it's all published and it's available, and everyone knows it. He gave an hour-long speech, all right, and then and CNN took a 30-second clip from Vivek in Iowa, one part of a comprehensive strategy, and Vivek ought to have drilled down on it being a trick. It is a trick. And Caitlin paused. You could see she understood. Oh, they've set me up here. That's her producer's fault. They thought they were being cute, and that's not cute. Everyone's on to that crap. Everybody is on to it. He said some very controversial things. He has said them on this show, and the difference between this show and every other show in media is I listen to what you say, and I give you the time to say it, and if I hear something I don't like, we stop and we pause and we talk about it. And Vivek does very well in that situation, and he also upsets some people in that situation. But I got to say, this stuff about the Blaze, on the Blaze, play it one more time, cut number 1. I do not like this at all.
9/11, inside job, or exactly how the government tells us?
I don't believe the government has told us the truth. Again, I'm driven by evidence and data. What I've seen in the last several years is we have to be skeptical of what the government does tell us. I haven't seen evidence to the contrary, but do I believe everything the government told us about it? Absolutely not.
That's two questions.
The 9/11 Commission? Absolutely not.
Do I believe the 9/11 Commission? Absolutely not. Look, I know Fred Fielding. I work for Fred Fielding. Fred Fielding is a friend of mine. The 9/11 Commission did the best they could with everything they can. They did not lie to us. They did not. I do not know what Vivek is talking about. That's for the next interview. But I don't know why you would not say no. It's not an inside job. We were attacked by terrorists. I don't know why you don't say that. I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The 9/11 Commission spent a long time in an exhaustive research into what happened on 9/11. Its report issued on July 22nd of 2004. And the hearings that were held, the people that were part of it, they did their best. They did a very fine job. They did not lie to anyone. And so I've got to have Vivek back on to talk to him about what he meant when he said this, cut number one, on the Blaze. Honestly, I don't even know why you're on the Blaze now. You've broken through. You don't have to do everything that comes along. I don't know who this host is. Maybe you do, Dwayne. Cut number one.
9/11 inside job or exactly how the government tells us?
I don't believe the government has told us the truth. Again, I'm driven by evidence and data. What I've seen in the last several years is we have to be skeptical of what the government does tell us. I haven't seen evidence to the contrary, but do I believe everything the government told us about it? Absolutely not.
That's two questions.
The 9/11 Commission? Absolutely not.
Okay, so I do not know who that host is. Dwayne, do you know who that host is?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It's Blaze TV. I don't know who their anchors are.
Yeah, and so I don't know who asked Inside Job. I don't know who in the world is employed anywhere in the country that says Inside Job, because they shouldn't be employed. Really, you want to go to InfoWars, by all means, you go to InfoWars. We don't need you here. There was nothing inside about the job, the 19 terrorists, the financing that Vivek wants to divert to. But when someone says inside job, they're talking about, did we know what was happening? Did we have someone on that airplane?
We watched what happened. We know what happened.
Yeah, we were on live that day. We know what happened, and 19 terrorists with the 20th man. I don't know who financed it, and the 9/11 Commission did a good look into everything, and I just don't know why you would even go there. I don't know why you would even go there. Generalissimo, myphdweightloss.com is our sponsor.
It is?
They're actually your sponsor.
They are.
You're now you're glued to this show forever.
I actually have people.
Well, you have, what, myphdweightloss.com people.
Yes.
Do they write you letters?
No, but they talked to me. I talked to Rachel last week.
Well, I know, but I mean, do the people who have gotten on the program because of your exemplary effort?
I actually do have people that have written to me. I've actually had somebody that says, "I'm going to try this. Will you be my accountability?"
Oh,
person?
you're starting a cult.
Well, maybe. In
the
chat
cult of
room,
Dwayne.
in the chat room in the universe, they're calling themselves Dwayniacs.
There's a cult.
If that's what you want to call it.
Dwaynists.
Well.
Dwaynists.
Who am I to get in their way?
It's well, there's a lot less of you to get in their way now.
Oh, exactly right.
You're not Jabba the producer anymore.
And I was getting close to it, yes.
Well, you weren't ever close to Jabba the producer. However, the light off your head still, we got to do something about that light in there.
Fine.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you look at your picture? It looks like someone's opening up the top of your head and is revealing a 100-watt bulb on the inside.
I've got to find a contractor because Bud the contractor retired 3 contractors ago.
Oh, he did, but I mean, can you put a shade over it?
No.
Harley, could you come in and put like
you want to wear a hat?
Well, I don't know. That might reflect too. 864-644-1900. That's
864-644-1900.
All right. Kim Reynolds, governor of Iowa, on with Shannon Bream, says this about Donald Trump skipping the debates. Cut number 9.
No, I think they expect him to be here. They want to interact. They want to interact with all of the candidates. We had great turnout at the Fireside Chats. I had a lot of Iowans and people outside of the state come up and just say thank you for doing that. It was a great opportunity to hear from the candidates. And so, Iowans take it very seriously. They're very knowledgeable, and they want to interact with the candidates. And so he was on the fairgrounds. He just chose not to do the Fireside Chats. But I think it was a great opportunity for Iowans to continue to hear from our candidates.
And then cut number 7, Governor DeSantis on Fox with Martha McCallum.
Everybody should debate. Everybody has a responsibility to earn people's votes. Nobody is entitled to anything in this world, less of all the Republican nomination for president. So I'm going to be there. I'm going to be making the case. And this is really a great opportunity because I don't think very many people over the summer have been following it that closely. I think this is going to be the first time where candidates are going to be able to speak unfiltered to a large number of Americans. And so I'm going to make the case that under Joe Biden, this country is in decline. We need to send Biden back to his basement in Delaware and reverse the country's decline. And I'm the guy that can do it. I've proven it in the state of Florida, and I won't let people down as the next president.
I think everyone should have done the debates, too. And it's not a secret. I told the former president that. He disagrees. I don't know if it's on the advice of counsel or not. But the decision to turn yourself in the next day, if his lawyers negotiated that, get some new lawyers. The day after the debate means that everyone that night can say, tomorrow Donald Trump is being arraigned for the fourth time. Everyone can say that. I'm astonished by the optics of the whole thing and the decision not to debate. But I'm not in charge of anything. I'm just Switzerland. Everyone is welcome here. Every candidate is always invited. They can call me up any morning, and I'll clear the time. But coming up next, Chairman Mike Gallagher of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party joins me. Having spent 6 months at this, what would he like Bret Baier and Martha MacCallum to ask the candidates about tomorrow night? It's an important conversation that's coming up. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good morning, America. The devastation in Maui continues to overawe and cause extraordinary grief. And former President Trump is out on $200,000 bail, but he's going to be arraigned the day after the debates. Is that the worst counter-programming choice in history? We'll find out. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Tomorrow night, 8 Republicans will meet on the stage in Milwaukee for a debate. I am certain that China will come up, the Chinese Communist Party, but I'm not sure how. Bret Baier, of course, coming up later in the program. Martha McCollum, two superb professionals, the equal of anyone else in our business, will be asking the questions. But I thought I would talk it through with the chairman of the House Select Committee on Engagement with the Chinese Communist Party, Mike Gallagher. Congressman, good morning. Great to have you. Thank you for joining me.
It is great to be with you, Hugh.
We're going to come back around to this kind of war, which I finished last night on the recommendation of you. It is a remarkable book, and I had no idea how awful the Chi-Coms were to our American prisoners. I didn't know. Did you know that before? Did the Marines teach you that when you were in the Marines?
No, there's two things that I think, well, a lot of actually our modern thinking about how to prepare people for when they get captured. Think survival, evasion, resistance, and escape school, which I attended when I was in the Marine Corps, actually comes out of the experience of the Korean War, particularly some politically sensitive moments when a few American captives refused actually to go home. There was, of course, this controversy during that time period, post-Korean War in the 50s, about this idea of brainwashing. This is prominently expressed in the fictional book, The Manchurian Candidate, which became a major American movie. But a lot of our thinking about how to better prepare pilots in particular, because they get shot down for resisting in captivity, actually comes out of that period.
Well, a couple of takeaways I'll never forget. No Turks died in the camps. The Turks are the toughest people in the world, and none of them died in the Chinese Communist Party camps. And the Americans didn't eat everything they could eat because they didn't like it, and they died of starvation. But the fact that the Chinese communists treated our men that way is a tell, because they've reverted to this mode. They were the hardcore Maoist Leninist mode in 1950 through 1953, and they've reverted. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I wanted to ask you at length. We got a lot of time this morning, and thank you for the time. If you were advising Bret and Martha, based upon your 6 months, what would you tell them are the major takeaways that you've learned as the chairman of the Select Committee, and how would you suggest they be turned into a question? Take your time, because that's a big question. What have you learned thus far in 6 months, and how would you convert that into questions for our candidates?
Well, I think the overall thing to realize for these candidates, and this advice is worth what they're paying me for it, is that there is, in my opinion, something called the Commander-in-Chief test. It's not, you're not graded A through F. I think it's a pass-fail endeavor, but it is absolutely critical. Put differently, I'm not myopic enough to believe that foreign policy, or a particular issue of foreign policy, is going to win a candidate the election, but it could very well lose them the election. The final thing to say about the assumptions going into this when it comes to foreign policy is that the conventional wisdom is that it doesn't really matter from a political electoral perspective, and there's a lot of social science to support that. I just would say it doesn't matter until it does. It doesn't matter until things go haywire on the world stage, and suddenly voters are looking to a prospective commander-in-chief to communicate, if nothing else, a sense of safety, that I have the temperament and the plan to keep America safe in a very dangerous world, which leads, I think, to the answer to your question. More than anything else, I think these candidates need to communicate that they have a clear understanding of the threat we face in the Chinese Communist Party, the scale and scope of this threat, why this isn't just a matter of some obscure territorial disputes in the South China Sea. This is indeed a global competition. The CCP has global ambitions. What happens in Xinjiang, what happens in Beijing is not going to stay there. They are intent on exporting their model of total techno-totalitarian control, which leads to the second point, that you need to find a way to contrast that threat to the enduring and inherently superior American values. And I do believe that this is a contest between two fundamentally incompatible systems of government, and it's unlike anything we've seen since, of course, the old Cold War. So communicating the stakes, communicating who we're dealing with in the nature of a Marxist Leninist regime that will stop at nothing to ensure that they survive at the expense of their own people, and that is the enemy of freedom around the world is the most important thing. In fact, I would say even more important than any particular policy position is just communicating that understanding of the threat and the prioritization of the threat, a recognition that as president, the most important issue that you will be dealing with as commander in chief is how to deter a war with the CCP in the short term and win a new Cold War with the CCP over the long term.
So let's put that in the form of a question for Bret and Martha, because I think you're right. I am looking at, of course, I've always looked at every one of these debates as an audition to be commander in chief. Eventually there comes a choice with the Democrat, but right now, when I vote in the Virginia primary, I will vote based on who will be the best commander in chief. And because that's what matters. 9/11 matters. What does W do on 9/11? That matters. What does W do vis-a-vis Afghanistan and Iraq? What does anyone do on any moment of crisis? What do they do in the Situation Room? Figuring out how to elicit that about China is a difficult thing. So you've been doing nothing but this for 6 months, right? And by the way, recap for our audience of Pittsburgh Steelers fans what you have been doing for 6 months, because they may never have heard of the Select Committee. This might be the first day they're listening to the audience. No acronyms or $5 in the tip jar for Food for the Poor.
Well, the Speaker of the House created the Select Committee on the CCP to do two things. One is to communicate why this matters, why anybody in Northeast Wisconsin or Pittsburgh or Ohio should care about the threat posed by the CCP, to shine a light on all the things that they're doing, whether it's threatening to invade Taiwan, whether it's establishing illegal police stations on American soil, whether it's infiltrating American universities or attempting to build spy bases in our near abroad, to explain why it matters and why your average American should care about it. The second thing is to identify policies and pieces of legislation that can pass even in divided government. In the 118th Congress, what is the center of gravity in terms of steps that we can take in order to put ourselves on a better position to beat the CCP in this short and long-term competition? So that's what we've been doing. We've broken it down essentially, though this isn't a perfect organization, into three main lines of effort. And I do think this reflects our overall lines of effort. Our grand strategy against China basically has three main components. One is military competition. What are the things we need to do to deter a war over Taiwan in the near term, as well as ensure that we maintain our dominant military position over the long term? The second is what I call economic statecraft. How do we selectively decouple from China so they don't have a coercive leverage over us, so they can't threaten, for example, to cut off the export of advanced pharmaceutical ingredients in order to bring us to our knees? And then the third line of effort is what I call ideological warfare or ideological competition, which is not only how do we rediscover a language for talking about American values and incorporate values and human rights back into American grand strategy, but also how do we better defend our institutions from Chinese Communist Party subversion, from something called United Front work, from traditional espionage, things like that, so we aren't corrupted and divided from within, which is what the Chinese Communist Party is trying to do. Wang Huning, who's Xi Jinping's top lieutenant, in the 90s wrote a book called America Against America, in which he talks about Americans as greedy, factional, and that title, America Against America, I think reflects their overall strategy, which is to divide Americans against Americans and thereby make it impossible for us to compete. So we've been developing policy recommendations along each of those lines. We've put out two reports, one on military competition, one related to human rights, and we're going to be putting out further reports. So, I think those are useful starting points for candidates who want to prepare for a debate in terms of where's Congress at on this issue? Where's the bipartisan center of gravity? Where can you potentially build on some of our work? But that's what we've been doing for 6 months. It's trying to understand and explain the threat and then identify policy solutions that help us to combat that threat.
How would you put that in the form of a question by Bret or Martha?
Well, there's the overall prioritization question. What is the biggest threat to American national security? Which is a bit boring, but is a useful starting point.
Stop. That's not boring. That is the question, isn't it? Shouldn't that just be asked? What is the number one threat to American national security and why? Shouldn't that be it?
That's table stakes, right? That's a good diagnostic question. And then it also allows the candidates, if they want to use their full time, and I forget how much time they get, to really articulate the key distinction between them and the Biden administration. Because if you read the Biden administration's national security strategy, there they talk about China as a pacing threat. Although I'm hearing now that the Pentagon is saying, don't say pacing threat, say pacing challenge or competitor because we obviously don't want to provoke the CCP for whatever reason. I've described this as kind of like a Voldemort phenomenon. There's this belief that the more we say things like New Cold War or say that the CCP is doing bad things, that it will somehow become more true, which I think is absurd.
I'll be right back. Chairman Gallagher is going to stay with me through the break, and then we're going to bring him back, and then we're going to do that again because we're going to talk to him for 50 minutes this morning about this. I can't believe I'm doing that. 50 minutes with Mike Gallagher. Coming right at you, America. Stay tuned. I'm back now with Chairman Mike Gallagher. This is the segment between the radio segments, so you don't get to hear this unless you're watching it on YouTube or on the television station. Chairman, in terms of what level should we expect of our candidates' knowledge? I see your Green Bay Packers thing. Do you know the Browns cleared $38 million in cap yesterday by restructuring Joel Bitonio and Myles Garrett's contract? We have the most cap space in the NFL. We are the team to beat. We will see you. I don't think you're making it to the Super Bowl this year. We are going to be in the Super Bowl this year, and you are not ready for this. I'm glad this isn't on the air because this is a serious conversation. But you had to do that little thing, and I'll just go get my brown sweater and just put it on during this segment like that. I'm going to wear this all the time now on the air because we're going to the Super Bowl, Chairman. Do you know that we cleared Myles Garrett contract yesterday? Do you know what we do? Do you follow sports at all, or do you just do Chi-Com stuff?
I don't follow Brown's contract minutia. I'll confess that, though. I was yesterday. Someone said that I had the potential to coach for the Browns after I helped them with a constituent case issue. To which I said, I would never coach for the Browns. What an insult!
All right, let me get serious again.
I'm already going off the rails.
The break off the rail. Let's get back on the rails. How many times have you guys held public hearings?
Gosh, I think 10 at this point, approximately 10. Yeah.
You had at least one set of war games. Do you have more war games coming?
We do. We have at least one more coming up that's going to be more focused on economic and supply chain issues.
Okay. Do you think the candidates know anything about this? I really do want to try and use today to focus their attention on China. Do you think they know anything about what the Select Committee has been doing? Have you been approached by any of them?
I think some do. It's part of the reason I wrote an op-ed on this that appeared today in the Wall Street Journal. It just came out, was an effort, maybe shamelessly, to draw attention to some of the things we're doing, because I think it creates some unique opportunities. I mean, to me, the most, and this reflects my bias in thinking that hard power is the most important variable on the world stage. I think a candidate who can articulate what we need to do to rebuild the military in general, but really the Navy in particular, which is, as you know, Hugh, is really struggling right now. It needs to be our priority force in our priority theater. It's not. We're going backwards. There's questions about focus, warfighting prowess. I wrote a report with the help of Admiral Montgomery about the lack of warfighting focus in the surface Navy with Tom Cotton, Dan Crenshaw, and others. I mean, I think that's a massive opportunity for a candidate really to take the ball on defense and go a few layers deep beyond just peace through strength, military good, China bad. You go a few layers deep on that and sort of communicate that you have a coherent plan. It doesn't need to be super detailed. Doesn't need to be a 50-page white paper about everything we need to do, but just an overall strategy for fixing the Pentagon.
Chairman, I'm going to get your comms team in trouble again. I haven't seen this plan that you and Cotton worked on. How can I not have seen this plan?
Well, this is a year ago. You got to blame Cotton's comms team for this because he was in the lead. Okay. And usually it's good to blame Tom Cotton for everything.
He's on next hour. I'll do that. Is that widely available?
Yeah, it's Cotton did it with 4 of us in the House. It was over a year and a half ago, kind of in response to all of these ship collisions, some of the reports that we were getting from active duty sailors, and just the changes over the years to training in the surface Navy. We did a deep dive drawing on the expertise of Admiral Montgomery and others in order to
I will gig him about that in the next hour, and I'll get a link, and I'll make sure it's on posted out to the candidates. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming right back with Chairman Gallagher. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Chairman Mike Gallagher of the House Select Committee on Engagement with the Chinese Communist Party returns. We talked during the break and we got off course because we did a little football trash talk, but now we're back on course. Chairman Gallagher, have you read this book yet, Kabul, The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the Warriors Who Fought to the End? It made me furious. It absolutely made me furious. Have you had a chance to read it yet?
No, but my friend Commander Salamander, who's great and whose podcast Midrats I highly recommend, just did a podcast with the authors. So I listened to it. It's not the same, but I'm now looking forward to reading the actual hard copy.
Well, the end of the book, which I don't know if Commander Salamander got to, because I didn't get to it, and I talked to him for a long time, is about how the Chi-Coms came in as soon as we left. They have designs on Bagram. They know what the air raids mean. They know what the strategic minerals mean. It's just a great example of what happens when we retreat in the world. In fact, in the This Kind of War book you had me read, I wrote down some notes. A retreat once started as the most difficult of all human actions to reverse. And they were talking about the retreat of the Norks at that point, and then we would retreat later when they counterattack with the Chi-Coms. But we retreated from Afghanistan, and they have come in. Have you focused yet on what they're doing there?
It hasn't been, admittedly, a subject of a hearing. We have experts, regional experts and Afghanistan experts. I think the key thing, to bring it back to the presidential debate, the obvious thing to do is to connect the surrender to terrorists in Afghanistan, our abandonment of our position, our abandonment of billions of dollars worth of military equipment, to then the collapse of deterrence in Ukraine, in Eastern Europe, because I do believe that our feckless position in Afghanistan sent a clear signal of weakness to Vladimir Putin. And no wonder Vladimir Putin ignored all of our warnings leading up to the invasion on February 24th, because we looked so weak on the world stage. And we allowed terrorists to completely take over the country. And I think also that has had a negative impact on our deterrent posture in the Indo-Pacific across the Taiwan Strait. You mentioned critical minerals. I also think this is a huge opportunity for presidential candidates to articulate a plausible path towards reducing our dependency on China for critical mineral processing. They control 90% of the processing. Right now, I think our attempts to wean ourselves off of to establish some form of semiconductor manufacturing independence are not going to be successful, in part because the Biden administration has placed so many onerous regulations on grants for chips fabrication facilities. But if a Republican candidate, particularly one with a business background or with a gubernatorial background, came in and said, here's our strategy when it comes to advanced pharmaceutical ingredients, critical minerals, and rare earth processing, tie that to a robust domestic economic agenda, that's a massive opportunity for someone trying to pass the commander-in-chief test. Because the reality is we are going to have to reclaim our economic independence from China in key areas. The progressives are experimenting with one way to do it. We need to identify a way that is fundamentally free market, but nonetheless achieves the actual goal of reducing our dependency on China.
Chairman Gallagher, there's only one veteran on the stage, Ron DeSantis. Mike Pence has got a son and a son-in-law on active duty. And of course, Nikki Haley's husband is deployed. Those three know about this. In terms of why is China a threat, is it a fair question to ask? Why is China a threat? What is it that worries you about China? Is that a fair question? If so, how would you answer that or suggest they answer that if you're one of the people on the stage?
Well, first of all, I do think DeSantis has been really good on China and probably the best in the field. I was watching the forum that they did in Iowa. I forget what it was called, the Iowa Faith and Family Forum. And he proactively brought up China as an issue and talked about what he's done in Florida to combat the threat, talked about the threat in global terms. And so though most of the discussion focused on Ukraine, and I understand that that's more of a politically divisive issue on the stage. And so there is I think the moderators will want to identify the differences between the candidate. Thus far, Governor DeSantis has been talking in clear and unapologetic language about why the CCP is a threat and what he would do to combat it, which is greatly appreciated. More to your point, as a Navy veteran, I think he has a huge opportunity to be the Navy guy, be the guy who's going to rebuild the Navy and put it in a position where it can deter Xi Jinping from attempting to achieve his lifelong ambition, was to take Taiwan by force. So to answer your question,
but Vivek just told me last week We'll give them Taiwan after we achieve semiconductor independence. In other words, Vivek understands Taiwan is important for its semiconductor. Your colleague on the committee, Ro Khanna, tweeted at me last night when I was already offline that doesn't do the trick. That's not why we're worried about Taiwan going down. Who's right?
Well, obviously, our interests in Taiwan extend far beyond semiconductors. Our interests predate Taiwan's emergence as a semiconductor powerhouse. And if the concern from Vivek, and I think it is, that our dependence on TSMC for semiconductor manufacturing needs to be eliminated, I just would say two things. It's highly unlikely that we're going to achieve semiconductor independence by 2028. TSMC is investing far more money than the CHIPS Act is investing right now. Even under a Republican president, we would struggle to wean ourselves off our dependency. But if the CCP had control of Taiwan, they would still be able to hold the rest of the world economically hostage. And that is the issue. Semiconductors or some sort of domain of economic competition, if they had Taiwan, they would be able to completely dominate the region through which trillions of dollars of international trade go. The other thing I would say is,
wait, we got to go to break. I'll come back. I got to go to break. We'll be right back with Chairman Gallagher during the break, and then one more segment beyond. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
So I'm back with Chairman Gallagher. Chairman, Vivek's answer to that is, I'm going to get India to cooperate, and if Taiwan closes the Taiwan Straits, we're going to close the Malacca Straits. Ro Khanna says that's crazy. That doesn't work. I don't know what the answer is, but I know what Vivek has told me. I don't think he agrees with you, but I'll let him speak for himself. I don't want to put words in his mouth, that we have to worry that much about the Taiwan Strait.
Well, he's obviously very smart. I would say this, with Marxist-Leninist regimes, their appetites grow with the eating. So I think it would be a mistake to think that if we just surrender Taiwan on a date certain, that we wouldn't have to worry about the problem. If they're the dominant regional power, they're one step closer to becoming the dominant global power. And that, I think, is the answer to your earlier question. Why is the CCP a threat? Because they're trying to destroy our geopolitical position, primarily by convincing us to destroy ourselves. They believe, as we mince words about whether they're a competitor or an adversary, they certainly believe that they're in an existential war with the free world led by America, and that China will win, rendering America and our constitutional system of self-government subordinate, humiliated, and wholly irrelevant on the world stage. So you can sort of think of it as an assisted suicide. They're trying to expedite our collapse. They provide the chemicals, fentanyl, the collapse in prosperity, COVID, IP theft, economic warfare, and the self-loathing and depression via political interference and information warfare. So I think the threat would not stop after Xi Jinping had taken Taiwan. I think it would only expedite and become greater.
So what if you could read Xi Jinping's mind? What is he thinking about us? What does he want to see happen to us?
I think he wants us to look inward and to abandon our position on the world stage and to be consumed with internal political battles. I also think he likes seeing us embrace this almost the CCP's narrative that America is an evil country, America is a neo-colonial racist hellscape. I mean, this is CCP propaganda that a lot of Americans have embraced. And I think ultimately he wants us to lose faith in ourselves as a force for good in the world. And ultimately, over time, he thinks the rest of the world is going to Finlandize more in the CCP's direction as an alternative model of government and world leadership, in part because America has lost faith in itself. That's why I think primarily, though hard power is the most important variable, this is an ideological competition overall. And ignoring the role ideology plays in the competition is a fatal flaw. And so we need to find a way to press the candidates on that as well.
We got 2 minutes before we come back. The ideological competition is quite simply not discussed. And I don't think our media is familiar with it. They're not stupid. They're ignorant of the ideological. They don't even believe it exists anymore, Chairman. Have you run into that? Do your Democratic colleagues believe that there are such things like Leninists and that the 20th century's ideological competition is back with a vengeance?
Well, I think for 2.5 decades, we tried to take the communist out of Chinese Communist Party. And this belief persists that, well, they're not really communists. They're not really Marxists. They've embraced forms of capitalism and they're rational actors. And I think this is a dangerous way of thinking to go down, particularly under Xi Jinping. The party has embraced its Marxist-Leninist roots. Xi's spirit animal is, in fact, Stalin. He looks to Stalin for guidance on how to operate. And so a candidate who understands that and can articulate that, I think, has a massive opportunity to distinguish themselves. The Democrats sort of come at the ideological competition through human rights, and there are a lot who genuinely believe in the cause of human rights. And though there are times when we have to prioritize between security concerns and human rights, this is when dealing with China, that's not an issue at all.
We're coming right back. Stand by, Chairman. Welcome back. This is part 5 of my interview with Chairman Gallagher this morning. And Mr. Chairman, I want to focus again, like a laser. What should Martha and Bret be asking? If I were king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not earl, I'd spend the entire debate on China because it's our number one existential threat. Every other threat is a bullet point underneath it. And you mentioned during the break fentanyl, for example. John Ellis has terrorism coming out of Afghanistan this morning as a threat. The economic collapse that China is undergoing in their real estate market will impact our markets eventually. But it's all under the heading of CCP. So I would make it a CCP debate. But it's not going to be that. They're going to end up talking about the former president, going to talk about the justice system. They're going to talk about all sorts of things that are hot button issues. If you get 3 questions and 3 follow-ups, and you start with, say, Governor DeSantis, and you bounce, you go to Governor Christie, and you bounce after that, and you go to Nikki Haley, what are the 3 questions?
Well, in the context of perhaps China has not been a big issue just because the candidates perceive Trump to be tough on China and don't want to fight on ground that's favorable to him. I think that's a mistake. This is an opportunity to get out of Trump's shadow. And there are things that the president did that I think you can disagree with on China. His administration was divided in many cases. Treasury was more dovish. The phase 1 trade deal did not realize its promise. The CCP committed to expanding purchases of U.S. exports by $200 billion. And like many a communist promise, that went unfulfilled. And Trump has praised Xi Jinping recently. So I just say that because I don't think candidates should hesitate to embrace this opportunity. 3 questions. And I think these are kind of the wedge issues in the Republican Party right now. I'm sort of putting aside the things that I think most of the candidates agree upon. Let's start what we were just talking about. What is your plan for deterring an invasion of Taiwan in the near term and rebuilding the U.S. military over the long term? What specifically will you do? How will you succeed where your predecessors have failed? And in the Trump administration, we made a down payment on readiness, but we did not actually rebuild the military. So what are you going to do to address the most pressing national security crisis? Because the next commander-in-chief is going to have to deal with likely the 4th Taiwan Strait crisis. And if you examine the previous 3, it took a whole lot of presidential fortitude and creativity to diffuse those situations and prevent them from escalating into World War III. And that's what we're dealing with. The second question I would say is related to this question of outbound capital flows. What restrictions should we place on American money going to China, particularly as the Chinese economy slows down and they start to deal with a real estate crisis, a demographic issue? The Wall Street voices are going to grow louder saying that, well, we don't need any restrictions on U.S. capital. But as are the CCP committee's recently launched investigation on BlackRock and MSCI has revealed, Wall Street is funneling American capital into at least 6 different companies Chinese companies on 6 different U.S. government blacklists. And these companies are building things like stealth fighter jets, aircraft carriers, artillery shells, advanced nuclear technology. So we are making the retirement health of millions of Americans dependent on the success of the Chinese Communist Party's project militarily and in terms of their Orwellian techno-totalitarian surveillance state. But some Republicans want no restrictions. They're more sympathetic to the Wall Street view. Others like me argue for a more intense set of restrictions so that we don't increase our dependency on China, and we don't subsidize our own destruction. I think we should ask the presidential candidates, how can we stop Wall Street from putting our service members in danger, subsidizing our own destruction, or funding the CCP's ongoing genocide in Xinjiang? And then third, I would say the issue of TikTok a few months ago was front and center. It's fallen off the radar in part because of an aggressive and expensive lobbying campaign on behalf of TikTok. But the issue still remains, which is that if we allow TikTok to become the dominant media company in America, we're allowing a CCP-controlled company to have that type of influence. It's like as if we allowed in the early 1960s, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis, Pravda and the KGB to purchase the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, and NBC. Trump tried to ban TikTok or force a sale. That ran into a legal buzzsaw. The Biden administration seems to have backed off for fear of alienating young progressive voters. Legislative action has stalled because the Senate effort was viewed as too broad, and people it got attacked by conservative commentators, and so people are a bit skittish right now. But we have to figure out this issue of Chinese-controlled applications operating in the United States and this broader issue of cross-border data flow. So that might be a little bit in the weeds, but it is so important to understand what we're going to do and succeed where we failed in the past. So those would be my three candidates. If you want to go a layer deeper beyond the overall prioritization, who's the biggest threat issue, those are areas where I know there's disagreement in the Republican field, and therefore a big opportunity for someone to distinguish themselves in the commander-in-chief test.
I want to land our plane on AI and Goldwater Nichols. By that meaning, I've spent a lot of time in the last 72 to 96 hours trying to read fast on artificial intelligence, self-generative capabilities because of some interviews I did last week. And it is rather an astonishing technology that is being unleashed into the wild without much supervision. China is stealing whatever we make and trying to improve on it. What would you do about AI, and do it in the context of, do you think there is an opening for a Goldwater-Nichols style reform of the Pentagon, by which I mean, the woke stuff is important to talk about, and I get readiness. We have a trouble with recruiting, but our contracting is a mess. It's an absolute disaster, and we've got to skinny down the civilians, bolster the uniforms, and get to where we can buy things in a hurry like we did in World War II and did not do in Korea. So AI and contracting, Chairman, how would you pose that in the form of a question to these candidates?
Well, I would say, well, first of all, just let's start with what the easiest thing is. Let's stop allowing American venture capitalists to invest in Chinese AI companies. I mean, that's table stakes. That's an entry point right there. So it is bound up in this outbound capital flow issue. You shouldn't be allowed to invest in Baidu, given how central this technology is towards geopolitical competition. I don't understand why we'd be allowing American money to help the CCP beat us in the AI race. Then you get to the thornier issue, which could lend itself to a question of, how do you regulate this technology? How do we continue our aggressive push on innovation while at the same time ensuring that the technology doesn't get out of control or is used for nefarious purposes? And that's a very difficult question. The Pentagon's set of ethical guardrails around AI use are actually decent. They're actually a good starting point. So if we can build upon those, and if we can expand those throughout the federal government, you then have a starting point where we can start to bring our key allies on board in terms of, this is how AUKUS thinks about how best to regulate AI without destroying the innovation so the Chinese win the race. From there, you start to build out concentric circles in terms of an international consensus around ethical use of AI and beating the CCP and the Russians in the AI race. You can extend it to other close partners that are technological superpowers in the region, Japan and South Korea. You can extend it to NATO allies in particular. But I think asking these candidates about how do you both continue innovation in AI while ensuring its ethical use is a legitimate question in the context of overall CCP competition. With respect to Goldwater Nichols, I think what we're dealing with in the present day is actually the unintended consequences of Goldwater Nichols. And a lot of the things that Goldwater Nichols try to fix, i.e. parochialism among the services, have now in the present day become a myopic focus on jointness for jointness sake, and a fetishizing of jointness. And so I actually think there's an opportunity for a smart reform of Goldwater Nichols itself in order to restore a focus on warfighting in the Pentagon. More broadly, and we talk about the acquisition workforce numbers something like 175,000 people. That's almost the size of the United States Marine Corps. Overall, the largest branch of the U.S. military is DoD civilians. It's much bigger than the Army. It's over 800,000 people. So a candidate who can articulate the fact that we need to rebalance our so-called tooth-to-tail ratio, reduce the number of DoD civilians, reduce, I would argue, the overall number of general and flag officers, and surge those resources down to the tooth, down to the pointy end of the spear. I think you can communicate that in a way that resonates with the American people. I would go even further and say the Pentagon owns a bunch of real estate assets, golf courses, and other things that it doesn't need. It could recycle those assets and instead use that money to spend on weapons. Ultimately, however, and this is where the commander-in-chief test comes in, if we take the lessons of Secretary Gates and the MRAP, or take any successful recent program amidst the growing Pentagon bureaucracy, what it does require is not only Secretary of Defense prioritization, but the support of the commander-in-chief. Unless the commander-in-chief prioritizes this, the bureaucracy in the Pentagon is going to win and swallow whoever tries to tame it. It is going to require the focus of the next president. That's why we don't have a bigger Navy. That's why we don't have a more lethal Navy. We haven't had that consistent focus on American sea power and someone who is willing to say to the defense industrial base, okay, we are going to be building 2.5 Virginia-class subs a year. We're going to be replenishing all of our stockpiles of long-range precision fires over the next 5 years so that the CCP doesn't think it can take Taiwan. Here is our actual shipbuilding plan, not just in distant 30-year plans that mean nothing when they arrive, but this is what we're going to do this year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. I'm going to hold you accountable for your targets, and then put that in a broader context of here is our plan for workforce recruitment so that we can actually build these ships. The final thing I'd say, I'm knowing going on, the next commander-in-chief will, of course, face a massive recruitment crisis unlike anything we've seen in recent memory, which is why I think every service secretary, the Secretary of Defense, and the president of himself needs to get into the business of recruiting, persuading young men and women that they have a duty and an opportunity to serve their country and that is a noble calling. It's going to take that level of leadership to fix our recruitment crisis.
Chairman Gallagher, we're out of time. That was a great primer. I appreciate the extra amount of time this morning. That'll be posted at hughhewitt.com on my YouTube channel as well. And I hope every candidate watches it before tomorrow night. Thank you, Chairman Gallagher. I want to remind all of you, even with your Green Bay Packers propaganda, thank you for doing that. I want to remind all of you that Food for the Poor needs your help. They sponsor our show, and I and the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt made a big contribution to them because we believe in them. The banner is at the top of hughhewitt.com. The hurricane season is upon us. Please go and be generous. Let me also remind you that ReliefFactor.com pays for this studio, and they sponsor this show. But that's not why I take it every day. All right? I'm glad I keep taking it if they went away. I just wouldn't tell you about it. I would keep taking it if they went away tomorrow. If they said, okay, we've saturated the Hugh Hewitt audience. We're done spending money on Hugh Hewitt. I'd say goodbye. I'd take down their branding, and I'd say I'm sorry to see them go. But I wouldn't stop taking ReliefFactor.com because it's worked so well for 10 years. I'm not getting younger, and I'm not getting faster, but I'm not going fewer miles. And that's because of ReliefFactor.com. The minor aches and pains, the stuff that you hear a lot of people complain about every day. Oh, ow, that hurt, that tweet. Oh, ow. Well, get rid of the ows. You don't need to live with that. You need your anti-inflammatory system to work at the right level. That's what ReliefFactor.com helps you accomplish. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. What to ask the candidates? That's what I'm going to ask Bethany Mandel next. Completely different perspective from Chairman Gallagher's. That of a mom who's homeschooling. Coming up on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Bethany Mandel joins me. Good morning, Bethany. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I just spent 45 minutes talking to Chairman Mike Gallagher about what he would like Bret Baier and Martha McCollum to ask the candidates about tomorrow night. You're my demo change. All right. We go from our hawks and our military people to our homeschooling moms and our people of faith. Bethany, what do you want the candidates to be asked tomorrow night? What are you looking for?
So I would like to see a little bit more personal. I mean, this is like the true demo change as a woman. I would like to see a little bit more personal. I love DeSantis, but I feel like this is a real weakness of his. He's very good on policy. He's very good about talking about sort of the job, but I like to hear more about who he is as a person, because that really says a lot about the kind of leader they're going to be and the empathy that they'll bring to the job, especially after watching Biden just absolutely bomb with everything related to Maui. We need to know that, God forbid, if something like that happens again, that we have a commander-in-chief who is empathetic, who understands what it's like to be suffering and not sort of like stand there and bloviate after like a week and a half.
You know, this is really a men are from Mars, women are from Venus moment. Yep. I don't care if any of these men or women have an ounce of empathy. I want them to be able to kill Chi-Coms if they attack Taiwan. And I mean, I just want to know, are they up to the commander-in-chief test? And I don't know how to get that yet. I
mean, the commander-in-chief job, there's a lot of different components. And I would argue that they don't actually do very much. A lot of, people in Congress, people in your local government, like those are the folks that impact your day-to-day life, unless something like Maui happens, unless there's a war. I would like to hear more from Vivek on foreign policy personally, because that is a really worrisome point for him. But on the interpersonal stuff, I think that that's a weakness of pretty much everyone else. Nikki Haley does it somewhat well, but I think that she's wary of seeming too womanly. And so I feel like she doesn't talk enough about her family. And when she does, it sort of just is a political talking point. Like, she's very scripted. And so is DeSantis. I don't love the scriptedness. And I think that that's part of the reason why people loved Trump so much, was because he just would say things and you were like, oh, wow, okay. You just opened your mouth and did that. And I think that people like that.
I'm kind of surprised, not about that assessment. I do think that's a lot of the Trump and now Vivek appeal is, I'll answer anything anywhere, no matter what happens, even if it's dumb, because I can always walk it back. Joe Biden does. But I thought you would say, I want to hear that my ability to homeschool my children will be protected, and that, in fact, I'll get some money from the state that I'm not using, even though I pay property taxes.
So that's a state decision. That's a local decision. I don't think that the president can make that assertion for me.
Oh, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You can. Federal legislation can say we are conditioning all the federal aid on your ability to have a voucher program. That's how we got an 18-year-old driver's law in the United States, is that we wouldn't give them any money for their highways until they lowered the drinking age to 18.
I'm wary of a lot of money coming into homeschooling, because then in states like Maryland, where I live, that comes with strings. And all of a sudden now you have to meet like benchmarks, and you have to have
that's way paranoid, because you can write a law to make it the Arizona system or the Ohio system, where you say you will not get any federal money unless you do vouchers and you leave the people who get them alone. It's not that hard to do, Bethany.
But that's in places like Arizona. I'm thinking more like Maryland, where they will do anything possible to meddle in your life as with your children.
Yes.
And a lot of it is not legal. Like what is happening in my county, Montgomery County, they are not doing legal things, and they are spending millions.
Did you
of
see the YouTube video did you watch the Davis, California librarian shut down the woman talking about women in women's sports? The most obvious unconstitutional action by a state employee I've ever seen on tape. And he was aging hippie with a T-shirt and a lot of beads saying, well, it says you can't, you're misgendering people, you have to leave the library. I was absolutely astonished. I was astonished. It's so wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, they don't really care for the rule of law. It's so funny because we're watching them like just go after Trump on every little thing, but the actual Constitution is like, oh well, you know, if the ends justify the means, basically.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I know Montgomery County has become unto itself a blue bubble as deep as San Francisco and Davis.
Yep.
But they are indifferent to, ignorant of, stupid about the American Constitution. And I don't know what you do. But I can assure you it is possible to write a federal law to get you money without any strings attached by Maryland and Montgomery County. If I'm right.
I would love that to be the case, but golly, living in Montgomery County, my perspective is the less government.
Why do you stay there?
I don't need
Why don't you leave?
Why don't I leave? Because the Jews have decided in their infinite wisdom that this is the only place in the Washington, D.C. area in which we live.
That's not true. You can leave. You don't have to make Aliyah. You can go to Alexandria. There are Jews in Alexandria. I've met them.
No, there's no
Bethany, thank you so much.
For real. Just makes fun of me. But for real, there's no restaurant.
This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good morning, America. The devastation in Maui continues to overawe and cause extraordinary grief. And former President Trump is out on $200,000 bail, but he's going to be arraigned the day after the debates. Is that the worst counter-programming choice in history? We'll find out. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I've spent most of today and all of yesterday talking about what my next guest might want to ask tomorrow night. Bret Baier, of course, will be hosting tomorrow night's Fox News debate, along with Martha McCallum, with 8 Republicans, Asa Hutchinson having qualified yesterday. Bret, we have a saying around here, everybody's a producer. And I'm sure you've gotten more advice than you could possibly ever want or hear. What's it like the last day before a debate? Is it everybody wants to call your first play?
100%. I've done a bunch of radio interviews from around the country, and I say good morning, and then they say, okay, here's what I think your first question is. And then they go through it. So, I think I take all of the suggestions. We've been working on it for a while. And actually the last day is to kind of fine-tune and say, what are we not getting to? What are we short-shrifting? And looking at the flow of the debate overall. That's what it is.
I'm not going to do that because I've been there and done that. And Dwayne and I laugh all the time when we get emails on how to do our show. You've done how many debates, Bret? About 20?
9.
9? Okay. But that doesn't include your Senate forums at the Kennedy Library.
Right. No, I'm talking GOP debates.
Yeah, I would gather the number of times that you've had people who have contrary points of view opposite of each other. Maybe it's 30. I don't know.
It might be up there.
Yeah. So I don't think you need any advice. I am curious about the rule set, though, because I'm not clear on it. What are the rules tomorrow night?
So the rules are that you get 60 seconds for an answer. If someone is mentioned, they get 30 seconds rebuttal. There will be times where we have like a lightning round question. We're heading to the end of a block, and we ask for, a shorter answer and put stipulations on that. Other than that, we're just trying to keep them in the guardrails, equal time as much as we can. 8 candidates on the stage, and that was settled last night. And there will be interaction back and forth. I mean, we're set up to do that, and we'll just have to monitor, time and being equitable when that happens.
I regret that President Trump has declined the invitation, and I think he has made a mistake announcing he's not going to do any debates. I don't think you can blockade the debates and win. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, Bret. Do you?
I do. I think he has to do a debate. I think it's fair when these other candidates say it's not a coronation, it's an election. And, I do think that, he skipped the 2016 Iowa debate with us, and he ended up losing the Iowa caucuses. I'm not saying there's a direct connection, but people do like to see engagement. He's very good at it, and I assume he's going to eventually do one debate.
Bret Baier, there's a story this morning that he has agreed to turn himself in Atlanta on Thursday. Do you think he plans this? Because that would be the worst counter-programming ever if that's voluntary.
I think there has to be some planning, Hugh. I mean, I think it is about sucking the oxygen out of the room for anybody who had a big night on Wednesday, making the rounds on Thursday. I do think that they're calculated like that. It's not a great counter-programming thing, but I do think it is calculated. I do want to say one other thing about there's all these stories out there about surrogates, Trump surrogates, and how they're not being allowed into the debate. That's not the case at all. It's if they get invited to the debate, first of all, the RNC handles all the tickets. If they are an elected official, they get a ticket no matter what. If they are a surrogate and they get invited, they get to go. As far as in the spin room, it is the candidates on the stage and their delegates. And then if any media organization who's in the spin room invites one of these surrogates, a Trump surrogate, they are welcome to come. But they have to get the invite from the media person in the room. Fox may be one of those media organizations. I don't know if Sean is inviting any of these Trump surrogates, but there's these stories out there that we're blocking them, and it's not true. And I just wanted to set the record straight.
I'm glad to know that. I wonder if the audience is going to be significantly diminished by the absence of president. I don't think it will, by the way. I think the audience is going to be enormous, and I do not believe people have a way of evading this debate. And so I just go back to the Thursday arraignment. To me, I'm going to have a bingo card, which is tomorrow the president is turning himself in for the fourth time to be arraigned on bail. Tomorrow. I just find that astonishing, Bret. Did you talk to anyone about that, about whether or not it's a choice on their part or a demand by Atlanta?
Yeah, I'll try to. Oh, it's definitely not a demand by Atlanta because they have until Friday, and by the judge. And I think that they were giving some leeway even beyond that from Atlanta, from what we've been told. So it is a choice of when to do it, and I'm going to try to find out whether they think that this is a counter-programming operation. But I think it is, or at least a choice to do that.
Bret, talk to us about the day before. I know what we did 8 years ago, but things have changed and the world is different. How are you spending the day before what may be a pivotal moment? It definitely is a pivotal moment. It might pivot again, but how do you spend 24 hours before a debate or 36 hours preparing?
Yeah, so I do a lot of media ahead of the debate, so I'll be doing radio and some TV shots, but we do set aside 3 hours during this day. We go through everything that we've kind of already gone through and polish it a little bit more. And some of those tweaks are significant. Sometimes it's like, it just doesn't feel right there. And I work really well with Martha and the team, and it's a very collaborative effort. So, and if there's some breaking news event that is either today or this week, maybe we reconsider some other question. And we'll have a similar session like that tomorrow. I'll do my show, Special Report, and then we'll get together for dinner and talk about.
Now, Governor Hutchinson got jammed in there last night, and you mentioned the time thing. So this is my last question. In the CNN Salem debates of 2016, there was a guardrail that no candidate could have less than 50% than the most amount of time that the most candidate can. And it was always Trump had the most, 20 minutes. That meant that, say, Carly Fiorina only got 10 minutes. Boy, she was mad at that ratio. Does Fox have a set ratio of 2-to-1?
No, it's not a set ratio, but we've always exceeded that. We've done these time and time again, and even the last person is only a few minutes off. They're really good about bouncing around, and if we're low on questions, we get those people in. I think Asa Hutchinson has some interesting things to add to the discussion. Obviously, he's a former governor of Arkansas, former DHS and Justice Department. I mean, he's got a long history, and he'll factor into some of the conversations.
Okay, so you and Martha are the quarterbacks. You come under center. You've got a play called. Someone talks in your ear. Can you disregard that if they say, oh, we're down on time with Asa, you got to give them one? Or do you have to live within the earpiece, not the substance, but the time?
Yeah. There's a battle. If you're in the heat of the moment, you're making the decision. You're the quarterback. So they can talk in your ear, but you've got the ball.
All right. I just wanted to know that because that was, in fact, something I learned the hard way because you don't have to do what they say. Bret Baier, hey, good luck. I'm sure it'll be a terrific debate tomorrow night. And if you get 50,000 suggestions today, the ones you ought to listen to are Mike Gallagher's, which I just taped, and I'll put the podcast up. Thank you, Bret.
All right. See you.
It is, they could just give him every debate. They really could. I have no idea how he votes. That's the amazing thing. I have no idea how Bret Baier votes. I've known him off and on, mostly on sets, a couple of occasions outside of a newsroom over the course of 10 years. And Guy knows him really well. And I know Guy's a Republican. I really can't say that about Bret Baier. I have no idea how he votes. I don't know Martha at all. So I just think they're the best. The equal of anyone in this business. I'm the best. But they are the equal of anyone in this business about asking questions. I just have a addiction to national security and the commander-in-chief test. So I'm maybe not the best. I just generally do not care about a lot of the stuff that they're obliged to ask about. I don't. If, for example, if transgender issues come up tomorrow night, that is wasted time. That is wasted time because everybody knows what they think. It's a 70, 80, 90% issue that men should not be allowed to compete in women's sports. It's a blue bubble issue. It's got nothing to do with us and the Republican Party nominating process, us being Republicans and independents who vote in Republican primaries. All I would ask about is Xi. And I got another question about Xi, and maybe I'd talk about Tehran and Moscow as well, but mostly Xi. Stay tuned, America. 1-800-520-1234. Connection to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I have got to call Andrew Del Rey or Todd Abakian, they're sponsors of our show, because I don't believe this is true. This story came out in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Banks don't love rich mortgage borrowers as much as they used to. The Fed's interest rate hikes and recent bank failures mean lenders aren't competing so fiercely for jumbo loans. This is not true. Yeah, this is, the headline writer may not know what the story says. And it simply says that jumbos are harder to get than they were. That is true. That is true. But you know what? Lenders love people with equity. And the more I got to confirm it with Andrew, but the more you put down, the more likely it is that your loan will get approved. Boom, done. Take it. So if you want to put down 50% of if you're going to buy a $500,000 house, and you say, I got $250,000 in cash here, and I need a $250,000 loan, you betcha, check, done. Provided you're not, a drug dealer or your $250,000 is in Bitcoin, you're going to get the loan. And call Andrew and Todd if you're going to put down a big deposit, and that wouldn't be a jumbo. A jumbo would be I'm going to put down $500,000 on $1.5 million house, so I need $1 million loan. Boom, done. All right, that you got skin in the game. And the people that have trouble getting jumbo loans, which are loans above the, I don't know what the limit is now, 600, 700,000. I don't follow that. That's up to andrewandtodd.com to do. They will make you that loan. And you ought to go to them. 888-888-1172.
Everybody should.
If your bank doesn't want to do a big loan, then fire the bank. And you're putting a lot of money down, fire the bank. That's just stupid. And Andrew and Todd are anything but stupid. They are the most experienced lenders I know. Thousands of you have used them, andrewandtodd.com. Thousands of you have also. Coming up after the break, Senator Cotton joins me, and I'm going to talk to him about his terrible rollout of whatever the plan was that he and Gallagher came up with last year on rebuilding the Navy, because Gallagher told me to blame him. But I do want to remind you all that Food for the Poor needs your help right now. They are prepositioning supplies for what is going to be an awful... We had a hurricane hit Baja. That has not happened since I moved to California in 1978. Now, it turned into a tropical storm by the time it moved up, and Dwayne didn't even get wet. Or if Dwayne got wet, he was aware of it. And because the Dwayneistas were chanting. Did you know that Dwayne had started a cult? Were you aware of that? I'm afraid of this. By the way, Dwayne, have you got a T-shirt for the cult yet?
There is no T-shirt that I know of for the cult.
How about Dwayneista?
No, because that's not what they've called themselves.
What do they call themselves?
They've called themselves Dwayniacs.
Do we have any Dwayniac music?
No.
Well, isn't there a song that rhymes with Dwayniac, like Maniac? Maniac, Maniac. And I played that before.
Yeah. Did you play on it?
I only in the studio session.
I see. Okay.
Can we go and play that song, Adam? I know you want me to remember Food for the Poor. Adam just in my ear, killing our buzz. Don't forget Food for the Poor. There's a banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. Go and give some money to Food for the Poor right now. Now, can we go back to the Maniac? Who did that song originally?
It was an 80s song. I'm trying to remember who actually.
I know. I've been doing this a long time.
One hit wonder.
Maniac. With Journey, isn't it?
No, female singer.
No. That's not a female singer. I have done so many sessions that I can't remember who I played for. But I laid this down. Who is this, Adam?
Michael Cimbella.
There you go. Thank you. Michael, if you're listening, I'm sorry I forgot. I'm sorry I forgot. It's just one of 1,000 sessions.
You'd feel really bad if he passed.
I would. I can't look. The number of people that I have played with who are dead. The number of people that I have played with who are dead.
It's
a long list. You would be surprised by the number of people that I have played with who are dead.
So would they.
Keith is alive. Well, all right, I want to remind you, Food
Keith
for the
will
Poor.
survive the apocalypse.
Yeah, that's it. The Food for the Poor is real. as is the threat. But I need you to go to HughHewitt.com. If you found that amusing, Dwayniac, we need a Dwayniac t-shirt. We'll give it away with Food for the Poor donations of $100. Please go and build a box. ReliefFactor.com is not part of the Dwayniacs. I can't believe you've got a fan club and I don't. ReliefFactor.com. They sponsor me, not the Dwayniacs. ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you started. $19.95 will bring you relief. And I'll be taking it as long as I'm on this earth and playing sessions. And I am not gonna lie to you. I take it every day.
Hopefully longer than that.
Hopefully longer. No, if I'm on this earth, I ain't doing one of those spaceship things. I am not taking Relief Factor up in Elon's rocket for the benefit of promoting ReliefFactor.com. I don't do video promotions. I don't do commercials. I just do stuff live on the radio because that's where I am, live on the radio in the ReliefFactor.com studio, and I do take it every single day. You should too. Senator Cotton is coming back, and the Dwayniacs are regrouping. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. Senator Tom Cotton joins me. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
I'm doing well, Hugh. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, Mike Gallagher, Congressman extraordinaire, slandered your comms team this morning, blaming you for not distributing widely the plan to rebuild the Navy that evidently you worked on last year with a few members in the House.
Well, it probably would have gotten a lot more attention and been more well received if he hadn't been a co-author of it.
All right. Thank you. That's all I needed. Senator, first of all, I do not know if you have a Tristan Kindle on your team or not, but she is briefing a bunch of Navy JOs today, and I hope she brings the message that an Army veteran does care about the Navy.
Yeah, Kristen is my national security advisor. She's a great aide and a brilliant young woman. She's actually been with me since she was an intern, worked her way all the way up to where she is now. She's also a Navy reservist and doing her reserve duty this year after 2 years ago being at the airport, being in and around the evacuation from the airport.
Have you read Kabul yet? The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the American Warriors Who Fought to the End by Jerry Dunleavy and James Hassan?
Well, Hugh, if you'll turn your copy around to the back page, you'll see that I not only read it, but I recommended it on the jacket cover.
Oh, I never read blurbs, so there you are. You, Congressman Waltz, and Ben Shapiro. Okay, I never read blurbs. I got to tell you, it infuriates me. It infuriates me, and I wonder, have your colleagues read it?
I think most of them probably have not, especially the Democrats who like to forget that ignominious episode in our history. It kind of reveals the fact that no matter how bad you think Joe Biden's evacuation from Kabul was, it was actually much worse in reality.
They are not getting a lot of television time. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, the liberal media is acting like a phalanx of bodyguards around Joe Biden and this administration because they're afraid that the Republican nominee next year is going to defeat him. And they're closing ranks around him just like the way they did around him once he was the nominee in 2020. They don't want to hear any bad news for the administration.
I agree. The key, though, to this book and what I talked with Chairman Gallagher about is the last chapter is about how China has moved into the vacuum we left behind. I am not surprised by that, but today John Ellis puts a point into news items. The terrorism threat in Afghanistan is growing by the day. And the clock is ticking down, Senator, I'm convinced, to when we are hit again. Do you agree with me?
Well, unfortunately, I think the evacuation from Kabul and the collapse of Afghanistan and its falling back in the hands of the Taliban has substantially increased the likelihood that terrorism will emanate from that country again. That's not just my opinion or your opinion, Hugh. The commander of Central Command has testified to that in front of the Armed Services Committee. And at the time, Joe Biden was telling us, don't worry, we'll conduct over-the-horizon counterterrorism strikes. And I said at the time, and I was right then, I'm right now, that it might as well be called over-the-rainbow strikes because they just simply were not going to happen without any actionable intelligence in a country that's landlocked and almost 1,000 miles away from the nearest Navy ship. And they haven't happened. There was one strike over the last 2 years. That was on Ayman al-Zawahiri. I'm glad that we killed him. He deserved to die. He was the leader of al-Qaeda after bin Laden, but I know the details that led up to that strike, and I can assure you they're not something that can be replicated, and that's why they haven't been replicated, and that's why terrorism is a growing threat in Afghanistan.
Because that is it. That's our over-the-rainbow capacity, was to take out Zawahiri, who was old and dying anyway. Senator, let me ask you about what I asked Chairman Gallagher and what I talked to Bret Baier about. Everybody and their brother gives Bret Baier the questions they think he ought to ask, and he nods and goes along. I don't do that. But if you were on the set tomorrow with Brett and Martha, what would you ask the 8 candidates who will be there if you had the opportunity to pose a question to them?
Hugh, I would focus on the most fundamental responsibility of the president, which is to keep the country safe as commander-in-chief, and the president we elect in November of 2024 will be president until at least January of 2029, which means he's going to be president for the 4 years in which China is most likely to go for the jugular in Taiwan. So I would ask them what they would do to stop that, and barring that, what would they do to roll it back? I think that's the most dangerous flashpoint in the world. So when it comes to the most fundamental responsibility of the president, I would encourage them to focus on that. Here at home, I think think I'd focus on the crime wave we have in our streets and the chaos at our border, and developing their concrete, specific, and actionable plans to stop that chaos and restore law and order both on our border and in our streets.
You know, Senator, I have urged the Republicans who talk to me not to say bad things about no labels. I don't want them to slam no labels, because I think serious Democrats have to be given an option that's not the Republican. What do you think about no labels?
Well, Hugh, as someone who is pleased to carry the label of the Republican Party, and as you sometimes like to say, people who rose that party shouldn't disparage party, I'm pretty satisfied with the label of Republican, and I'd like to elect more Republicans, and I'd like to bring more people into the Republican Party. Now, all that said, I understand the Republican Party isn't the home for every American, and we need to reach out to those Americans who may not be comfortable with every part of our platform or our party's ideas, and provide them reason to vote for Republicans over Democrats, even if they say don't want to register as a Republican and would never go to a Lincoln Day dinner or to a Republican county committee. So although I think labels can be pretty useful in politics, and like I said, I'm proud to be a Republican, at the same time I understand that some of our fellow citizens may not want to carry that label, and we still need their votes to win elections.
Yeah, I am a Republican for Republicans. I talk to Republicans about Republican politics. But I think the poor Democratic Party is broken, much more than we are. I mean, they always talk about how we're broken and a threat to democracy. Nonsense. They're broken because their left wing owns their party, and we need the Democratic Party to get serious. We got to get more Angus Kings. We got to get more. Who's the fellow who, the Democrat from Rhode Island who isn't nuts? Jack Reed. We need Jack Reed. Yeah, we need more Democrats like that who are serious, and no labels would give them a venue. Or am I wrong about that? Would it hurt Republicans more than Democrats?
Yeah, I think it's on. You have to look at it a case by case, state by state basis. I just think that we should try to be reaching out to the broadest coalition of voters we can, and in some cases, you're going to be reaching out to people who still identify as Democrats. We still have in Arkansas cultural, ancestral Democrats, people who were raised when the state, as recently as 10 or 12 years ago, was still, kind of a one-party, well, I guess maybe at this point, 13 or 15 years ago, one-party Democratic state by and large. And they may not want to change parties, but at the same time, they recognize the Democratic Party at the national level has kind of gone off the deep end of left-wing ideology. Those are many of the people who came out to vote for Donald Trump for the first time in 2016. We need to keep them voting for Republicans and expand our reach to more voters like them.
Now, Senator, I mentioned Senators King and Reed as sort of serious independent Democrat, Angus caucuses with the Democrats. Is there any way that you can get 60 Senate votes for a Pentagon reform that would expedite the rebuild of the American military, the end of the politicization of it, and the restoration of confidence in its competency?
We can, Hugh. The last 2 years, we got more than 60 votes for a substantial increase in defense spending over what Joe Biden submitted as a budget. And he did that in part on purpose because he knew that Republicans would increase the defense budget and that there'd be a handful of Democrats like Jack Reed, like Angus King, like Jeanne Shaheen, like Joe Manchin, who though they may be very liberal in their domestic policy views, in my opinion, at least are more responsible when it comes to the nation's defense than, say, Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So we have done that in the past. To really do it effectively, though, Hugh, what we need is the majority. Because when we have the majority, we not only control what goes on the floor, we control the baseline debate in the committee. And when we have the majority, it's much easier to get those votes for serious legislation that will rebuild our military, that will eliminate the left-wing social engineering and experimentation, and get back to the basics of deterring war and winning war if necessary.
Do they understand, and we're talking about serious Democrats, that 800,000 civilians is too many and that the contracting system is broken and that we have to do something quickly? Is there any urgency on that side of the chamber?
I think some do, Hugh. That's the kind of thing that you're not going to get a lot of traction on when Democrats are in control, when they're writing the bill that we're then working off of, or that they're controlling the agenda. Look, why is Chuck Schumer out there blocking the FAA bill? It's because he's carrying water for unions. That's the same thing you'd see in the defense bill. But if Republicans are in control, if we win back the majority by electing people like Tim Sheehy in Montana, Jim Banks in Indiana, then we'll be able to set the terms of the debate and say, like, look, if you're not a rifleman on the front line or a pilot in a fighter aircraft, you're supporting those two people. And the further you are away from those two people, the harder it is to justify what you do in the Pentagon. A lot of important jobs there, both uniform and civilian. But if you're not doing one of those two jobs, you need to justify what you are doing in terms of what they're doing.
Senator, last question. I want you to check my work. David Weiss, the U.S. Attorney from Delaware, handling the Hunter Biden prosecution, now special counsel. Judge Norika, the district court judge that rejected the plea agreement. They are routinely described as Trump appointees. And I'm just railing about this because you do not get anyone appointed to the district court in a state or anyone appointed as a U.S. attorney in a state unless you have the Democrats on board. Am I right about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Hugh. It's a longstanding custom in the Senate that no U.S. attorney and no district judge, no trial court judge, will move to a vote in the Senate unless you have the support of both senators from the home state. So although Donald Trump nominally submitted Mr. Weiss's name and Judge Norika's name to the Senate to be nominated, it couldn't have gone, neither one of those could have gone forward without the support of Chris Coons and Tom Carper, long time, decades long, personal friends and political allies of Joe Biden. So it's just a fact that although Donald Trump nominated these people, they had to pass muster first with the Democratic senators from Delaware.
Senator Cotton, thank you. I hope somebody in the media notices that, because when you see Trump appointed, that's an attempt to suggest that they're somehow biased against Hunter Biden and for Donald Trump. They're not. They're not. They're professional. I get that. But I'm tired of that coverage. Senator Cotton, thank you. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back. 1-800-520-1234. I got time for a couple of calls about tomorrow night. 1-800-520-1234. And what you want asked or don't ask. I'm having trouble here with a couple of things that Dwayne is doing to my computer. But I will be right back. You, Dwayne X, stand down. Stand down. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Regnery's The People's Justice, Clarence Thomas in the constitutional stories that define him.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I got to tell you, don't believe a thing you read in the media about the debate tomorrow. Not a thing. Listen to me tomorrow and listen to me on Thursday. And I may be on the Salem News Channel on Thursday night. I don't know. I'll write something for the Post. But I just saw a Politico tweet, literally 5 seconds before this segment. Needs a breakout moment. DeSantis heads to debate looking for a breakout moment. His campaign has struggled to gain traction. Can he use the debate to turn things around? This is absolute nonsense by a left-wing website. Now, Politico's got a couple of good people working for it. Olivia Beavers comes on here. That's great. Brad Dayspring, their publisher, is a friend of mine. I like a lot of people at Politico. They've gone completely left-wing, in the bag. Ryan Lizza effect, and Ryan's a nice guy, but he's a left-winger, and they're very left-wing. Axios is left-wing. Semaphore is left-wing. Every newsletter produced in the Beltway is left-wing. Why do I leave the Beltway? For a couple of months in the winter and a few months in the summer. Like, you got to get away from there. You got to get away from, or you can't do the news. And I am just deadly serious. It is the narrative is kudzu on your head, and it gets into your, like an earwig. If you're old enough to remember the Twilight Zone, the earwig, that's what happens to you in legacy media if you go into the Beltway and you don't get out, is that you begin to believe your own stuff. And this idea that DeSantis needs a breakout moment, that is the stupidest thing I have seen in a headline in a long time. But there's a lot of stupid things out there. He doesn't need anything tomorrow. Nobody needs anything tomorrow. It's the first hurdle. You can take yourself out of the race tomorrow. All right? You can absolutely faceplant and be done. Rick Perry, 3 agencies I would close down. End of campaign. Right? You watch this long enough, you know you can end a campaign, but you don't need to win in a debate. It's just that simple. It really is that simple. You can end a campaign, but you don't need to win. John inside the Beltway. Hello, John. Good morning.
Good morning. Real quick, the Democrats are using abortion or feel abortion as a winning issue. I would ask these candidates how they're going to blunt that charge that
I wouldn't bring up abortion in the first place. This is about Republican primary voters. It's not about winning the applause of the mainstream media. The Republican Party has agreed that abortion is an evil and ought to be minimized as much as possible. And it's up to the states to do it. I wouldn't spend a minute on a mainstream media generated question. That's why I wouldn't have a single mainstream media platform carrying this. John, I wouldn't ask about abortion ever.
But it's going to be asked.
No, it shouldn't be. This is for Republican voters.
But it will be.
But everyone on that stage, no, it's just an opportunity to screw us. You got to understand, you don't. These are opportunities. Every time you put a legacy media person up there, whether it's George Stephanopoulos asking Mitt Romney if he wants to ban birth control, all it is for them is an opportunity to screw us. Do not think there is not one neutral media person in the world. The only people.
Well, it's going to be something they're going to have to address because it's
No,
there.
they don't have to address it. Jerry, no, we don't. In fact, I think you're a seminar caller. Goodbye. We do not have to address a thing about abortion. The position is Dobbs was correctly decided. It is up to the states. And every time somebody asks about abortion, they are advancing the mainstream media agenda unless they say, should abortion be illegal in the 9th month? You know, the day that I hear that question asked, I might say, okay, that's not an in the bag. I am tired of advancing their agenda. I care about China and education. I care about our economy. I do not care about LGBTQ rights being in the debate. There is no disagreement. There is no effort to roll back LGBTQ rights. There is no book banning going on. All right, it's just there are so many nonsense narratives out there. And the Republican National Committee knows it, and they are working very hard to make sure that fair people are in charge of this debate. Now, there might be a reason for one of the candidates to bring it up, and that's okay for the candidates to bring it up. But honestly, I have just had it, and the Presidential Debate Commission has screwed us for 20 years, and mainstream media has screwed us for 20 years, and Politico screws us, and I'm just tired of it. Don't get any of your information from a source other than me. Just listen to me and then go off and garden. listen to me and go then listen to Dwayne or listen to the Grand Old Pod or any other podcast that's run by a center-right or conservative person or Salem Media. Just turn them off. Turn them off. They are not fair. And then go and read this book. Because I haven't seen this anywhere. Kabul. Have not seen one legacy media story about the most infuriating book I've read in 20 years. Not since Looming Tower. It's been 20 years since Looming Tower came out, maybe 18. And Looming Tower infuriated me because that didn't have to happen. Kabul didn't have to happen. And you don't see it because they're all in the bag. They all share the assumptions that abortion ought to be legal everywhere. They all share the assumptions that Donald Trump has been justly tried everywhere. They all share assumptions, and they're just an echo chamber. And my gosh, I'm sick of it. And I am hopeful that the RNC comes through and takes control of these debates so people talk about what Republican voters want to know when they nominate someone. Okay, that's it for today. Go over to Food for the Poor, please. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Be generous. They need our help. They need our help. And you are grateful and generous people. Thank you.